Developer Giant Sparrow has created a work of art. So you play as Monroe, who lives in an orphanage because his mother died. His mother was a painter who left more than 300 paintings, all of them unfinished. Monroe was allowed to keep his mother's silver paintbrush and her favorite painting, the unfinished swan. The swan escapes from the canvas at night and enters a magical door, and a curious Monroe follows. While chasing the swan, Monroe found himself inside the kingdom of a narcissistic king. The king only wanted the color white in his kingdom, not even grey for the shadows. He made the people live in an unfinished and impractical maze that was so large that they got lost. The maze reminded me of the Greek myth of King Minos and the labyrinth on the island of Crete. So the people don't like the king and they begin painting colors, resulting in the king banning all the brushes and deciding to paint shadows. Because the king is indifferent to the needs of the people, they leave the kingdom, and the king, out of frustration, decides to create a new kingdom in another place. So he paints a ship and leaves, never to return again, leaving his kingdom unfinished. Monroe leaves the first kingdom on a hot air balloon, but falls into the sea below, washing ashore in the king's second kingdom. He learns more about the king, who had help from a gentle but lazy giant. The king ignored the people of his kingdom, which created a lot of problems. The king created canals, but the water brought vines which grew uncontrollably and began taking over the city. So he mandated the people to pull up the vines, but because they don't like the king, they secretly water the vines to annoy the king. The king saw his white and clean city suffocated by the vines and decided to create something that could remove the vines. The horrible creation, with its tentacles and jaws, wanted to blacken the white kingdom. The king was helped by his pet hippopotamus and the giant in forcing the creature into the sea forever. The king was left tired and his magical powers were drained, so he went to an island where he would start a family. But he needed to build a house first. Monroe gets on an airship that reminded me of the animated movie Treasure Planet. He ends up in a forest where animals are waiting in the dark to hurt him. He journeys to the king's house, avoiding the dangers lurking in the dark, and using bioluminescent plants. Monroe reaches the house, which is also unfinished, like almost everything in this game, and has to enter a frame that looks like a construction plan and create structures inside the frame in order to move forward. Inside the house, we find out that the king created a wife who liked painting, and she, like Monroe's mother, never completed any of her paintings. The queen did not like the narcissistic king, as he did not even notice that the queen was visibly pregnant. So she left and took the picture of an unfinished swan with her. Monroe goes to the island and climbs up to the head of the monument. The king had made the large monument of himself on the island and started living in the monument's head with his pet hippo. The king wakes up and starts telling Monroe about the dream he had. Now I start the game again, but as the king, who was admiring his own kingdom, till he found the contrast of black paint on his clean white kingdom. We, the player, know that the miscreant the king was talking about is Monroe. The king then follows after the boy sullying his kingdom, and the two kingdoms are strangely reversed. He is devastated to find green vines taking over his creation. He finds water creeping up on everything he built and enjoyed, and he abruptly ends up in a church, at a funeral, his own funeral. Here we see the king's body in a coffin, and we become the boy, as seen in the mirror. Meanwhile, the swan has grown to an enormous size. We leave the church and start walking towards the monument in the island, and with each step we grow larger and we bump into the monument, which falls and sinks below the water. The king understands that his creations will not last forever, and given the scale of the universe, everything will eventually turn to dust. The king wanted to leave a legacy behind, but realizes that no monument will withstand the sands of time, and instead he should leave his tools, his magical paintbrush, to someone younger and allow them to use it freely. He says that Monroe might make some mistakes at first, but gradually he would learn from experience and will wield the brush to change the world around him based on his own creativity. The king hands his brush to Monroe and tells him to go. Monroe finds himself in his bedroom at the orphanage and sees that the swan has returned to its painting. Without wasting any time, Monroe finishes the swan and also adds 2 signets. And as Monroe happily goes to sleep, the game ends. The Unfinished Swan is a game based on a storybook meant to inspire creativity and imagination. Like most fairy tales, the story begins with the death of the player character's mother, so dark themes are introduced very early on. The focus on parents and children is unique in this game, more realistic even. The adults within the game, Monroe's mother, the king, his queen, all have some creative quality in them, but they never finish any of their creations, and the child, Monroe, has to handle them, in some cases complete them. Like many parents put the burden of finishing their own dreams on their children, the adults within the game seem to be reliant on Monroe to complete the swan. The king, towards the end, learns that children have their own personality and imagination and should be allowed to make different choices. The king starts out as a narcissistic and self-centered character, as we can see his own statue, made by himself. This reminded me of the poem Ozymandias by P.B. Shelley, a poem, a sonnet to be precise, that teaches the futility of creating monuments to be left as one's legacy, and the best way to be remembered is by helping others. He gets angry at Monroe for using black ink on his white kingdom and watering the vines, leading them to spread over his kingdom. Monroe will make some mistakes, but the king has made mistakes too, like creating a labyrinth where his people got lost, making canals where some slow children were washed away, ignoring his beloved queen, leading to her leaving him. The vines may also represent nature, as no man-made creation can resist being overtaken by the forces of nature. It reminded me of this picture I took long ago when I found the roots of a tree splitting up a wall. The king's white world was so uninspiring, stale and lifeless that his people started adding colors until he banned other magical brushes. In the second kingdom, his people would water the vines when the king wasn't looking. This shows us the importance of communicating with others and being open to the needs and desires of other people, even if they are different from you. The king fails to do this and his people abandon him, and later his queen leaves him too. Only his pet hippopotamus stays with him, and the lazy giant helps him a little. The swan is a metaphor for imagination and creativity, as we chase after it throughout the game and it grows huge towards the end. The game ends as Monroe completes the Swan and paints two signets to signify that the next generation will be taking over soon. I have to point at the sound design in all the levels, from the upbeat, joyous melodies to the tense, thrilling tunes that indicate calm and dangerous environments respectively, or the unexpected switch in music like these, which are unique within game design. A unique characteristic is the visual contrast between the starting levels and the levels in the dark forest towards the end. The subtle mention of subtitles by the king was a rare fourth wall break I wasn't expecting. I will upload a video on breaking the fourth wall soon. So there it is, a video game with a story better than most modern movies. I hope you have enjoyed the videos and the story and learned a few lessons and some new words along the way. Thank you for watching.